Okay, I didn't know I was going to be reading any more tonight, but I continued on in this, and so I'm back again with the Urantia Book. This section is still in the life of Jesus, the ordination of the 12. This is number 6, and it is titled The Evening of the Ordination. And it reads, Sunday evening, on reaching the home of Zebedee from the highlands north of Capernaum, Jesus and the 12 partook of a simple meal. Afterward, while Jesus went for a walk along the beach, the 12 talked among themselves. After a brief conference, while the twins built a small fire to give them warmth and more light, Andrew went out to find Jesus, and when he had overtaken him, he said, Master, my brethren are unable to comprehend what you have said about the kingdom. We do not feel able to begin this work until you have given us further instruction. I have come to ask you to join us in the garden and help us to understand the meaning of your words. And Jesus went with Andrew to meet with the apostles. When he had entered the garden, he gathered the apostles around him and taught them further, saying, You find it difficult to receive my message because you would build the new teaching directly upon the old. But I declare that you must be reborn. You must start out afresh as little children and be willing to trust my teaching and believe in God. The new gospel of the kingdom cannot be made to conform to that which is. You have wrong ideas of the Son of Man and his mission on earth, but do not make the mistake of thinking that I have come to set aside the law and the prophets. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill, to enlarge and illuminate. I come not to transgress the law, but rather to write these new commandments on the tablets of your hearts. I demand of you a righteousness that shall exceed the righteousness of those who seek to obtain the Father's favor by almsgiving, prayer, and fasting. If you would enter the kingdom, you must have a righteousness that consists in love, mercy, and truth, the sincere desire to do the will of my Father in heaven. Then said Simon Peter, Master, if you have a new commandment, we would hear it. Reveal the new way to us. Jesus answered Peter, You have heard it said by those who teach the law, You shall not kill, that whosoever kills shall be subject to judgment. But I look beyond the act to uncover the motive. I declare to you that everyone who is angry with his brother is in danger of condemnation. He who nurses hatred in his heart and plans vengeance in his mind stands in danger of judgment. You must judge your fellows by their deeds. The Father in heaven judges by the intent. You have heard the teachers of the law say, You shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that every man who looks upon a woman with intent to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. You can only judge men by their acts, but my Father looks into the hearts of his children, and in mercy judges them in accordance with their intents and real desires. Jesus was minded to go on discussing the other commandments with Zebedee when James Zebedee interrupted him, asking, Master, what shall we teach the people regarding divorcement? Shall we allow a man to divorce his wife as Moses has directed? And when Jesus heard this question, he said, I have not come to legislate, but to enlighten. I have come to reform the kingdoms of this world. I have come not to reform the kingdoms of this world, but rather to establish the kingdom of heaven. It is not the will of the Father that I should yield to the temptation to teach you rules of government, trade, or social behavior, which, while they might be good for today, would be far from suitable for the society of another age. I am on earth solely to comfort the minds, liberate the spirits, and save the souls of men. But I will say concerning this question of divorcement that, while Moses looked with favor upon such things, it was not so in the days of Adam and in the garden. After the apostles had talked among themselves for a short time, Jesus went on to say, always must you recognize the two viewpoints of all mortal conduct, the human and the divine, the ways of the flesh and the way of the spirit, the estimate of time and the viewpoint of eternity. And though the 12 should not command all that he taught them, and though the 12 could not comprehend all that he taught them, they were truly helped by this instruction. And then said Jesus, but you will stumble over my teaching, because you are wont to interpret my message literally. You are slow to discern the spirit of my teaching. Again, must you remember that you are my messengers. You are beholden to live your lives as I have in spirit lived mine. You are my personal representatives, but do not err in expecting all men to live as you do in every particular. Also, you must remember that I have sheep not of this flock, and that I am beholden to them also, to the end that I must provide for them the pattern of doing the will of God while living the life of the mortal nature. Then asked Nathanael, Master, shall we give no place to justice? The law of Moses says, this is going to get good, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What shall we say? And Jesus answered, you shall return good for evil. Yes. And there's truth. My messengers must not strive with men, but be gentle toward all. Measure for measure shall not be your rule. The rulers of men may have such laws, but not so in the kingdom. Mercy always shall determine your judgments, and love your conduct. And if these are hard sayings, you can even now turn back. If you find the requirements of apostleship too hard, you may return to the less rigorous pathway of discipleship. On hearing these startling words, the apostles drew apart by themselves for a while, but they soon returned, and Peter said, Master, we would go on with you. Not one of us would turn back. We are fully prepared to pay the extra price. We will drink the cup. We would be apostles, not merely disciples. When Jesus heard this, he said, Be willing then to take up your responsibilities and follow me. Do your good deeds in secret. When you give alms, let not the left hand know what the right hand has done. And when you pray, go apart by yourselves and use not vain repetitions and meaningless phrases. Always remember that the Father knows what you need even before you ask him. And be not given to fasting with a sad countenance to be seen by men. As my chosen apostles, now set apart for the service of the kingdom, lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth, but by your unselfish service lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasures are, there will your hearts also be. Actually, it says, there will your hearts be also. The lamp of the body is the eye. If, therefore, your eye is generous, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is selfish, the whole body will be filled with darkness. If the very light which is in you is turned to darkness, how great is that darkness? And then Thomas asked Jesus if they should continue having everything in common. Said the Master, "Yes, my brethren, I would that we should live together as one understanding family. You are entrusted with a great work, and I crave your undivided service. You know that it has been well said, no man can serve two masters. You cannot sincerely worship God and at the same time wholeheartedly serve Mammon. Having now enlisted unreservedly in the work of the kingdom, be not anxious for your lives, much less be concerned with what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor yet for your bodies what clothing you shall wear. Already have you learned that willing hands and earnest hearts shall not go hungry. And now, when you prepare to devote all of your energies to the work of the kingdom, be assured that the Father will not be unmindful of your needs. Seek first the kingdom of God, and when you have found entrance thereto, all things needful shall be added to you. Be not therefore unduly anxious for the morrow. Sufficient for the day is the trouble thereof." When Jesus saw they were disposed to stay up all night to ask questions, he said to them, "My brethren, you are earthen vessels. It is best for you to go to your rest, so as to be ready for the morrow's work." But sleep had departed from their eyes. Peter ventured to request of his master that, "I have just a little private talk with you. Not that I would have secrets from my brethren, but I have a troubled spirit, and if, perchance, I should deserve a rebuke from my master, I could the better endure it alone with you." And Jesus said, "Come with me, Peter," leading the way into the house. When Peter returned from the presence of his master, much cheered and greatly encouraged, James decided to go in to talk with Jesus. And so, on through the early hours of the morning, the other apostles went in one by one to talk with the Master. When they had all held personal conference with him, save the twins who had fallen asleep, Andrew went in to Jesus and said, "Master, the twins have fallen asleep in the garden by the fire. Shall I arouse them to inquire if they would also talk with you?" And Jesus smilingly said to Andrew, "They do well. Trouble them not." And now the night was passing. The light of another day was dawning. Okay, I now completely understand why I had to come back and read some more. That was a very, very good read. So I want to address a couple things here. What he told the apostles, saying that the new gospel of the kingdom cannot be made to conform to that which is. He said that the new could not be built upon the old. He said, "But do not make the mistake of thinking that I have come to set aside the law and the prophets." Okay? "I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill, to enlarge and illuminate. I come not to transgress the law, but rather to write these new commandments on the tablets of your hearts." Okay, I want to address those things right now. The Essenes, which predate Christianity, okay, they taught the laws of Moses, which Christians refer to as the 10 Commandments. They were referring to them as the laws of Moses, okay? I'm gonna try to tell you what Jesus meant, what Christ meant when he said this. Because I have had Christians say to me, we are not to add to or take away from the Bible, okay? And that Christ had said, I did not come to take away from, but to add to it, okay? Let me, something to that effect. What I want to address here is that what Christ came to teach was so very different from the mentality and the structure of beliefs of the time. And this is a perfect acknowledgement of that. The new cannot be built upon the old, and the new cannot be made to conform to what is, because they're not the same. But he goes on to say, but don't make the mistake, I haven't come here to criticize the laws of Moses. I haven't come here to criticize the prophets who were doing good work, whose intentions were good. And we see that today in the Christian churches and probably other, I can't speak to other faiths, okay? Because I was brought up in the Christian community in the Western world. So I'm going to speak to that. The preachers, the pastors, the bishops, the clergymen, the congregation, the members that make up the church, okay? These people have great intentions. They are there for the right reasons. They are there to give thanks, to exercise gratitude and appreciation to our infinite creator and Christ who came to give this message. And Christ is saying here, I have not come to criticize any of these works. I have not come to criticize because the intentions were absolutely perfect. The intentions of the people. Okay? But he says, I have not come to transgress the law, but rather to write these new commandments on the tablets of your hearts. Because, and he goes in to talk about it, there are two different things going on in the world, okay? Christ is asking us to bring down the divine connection, to bring down that divine light into our body. This is writing on your heart, okay? I have come to write these, to enlarge and illuminate these new commandments on your hearts, on the tablet of your hearts. He's saying, I have come to remove the blocks that these belief structures have put in place so that you can know truth. I have come to write it on your heart. I have come to bring the divine light into you. I don't need to tear down the laws because you will know what is right and what is true if you hearken to my message. Okay? So he's saying, I'm not looking to criticize, and stop looking at that stuff. Stop thinking about those things, and because that's where the fear comes in. Oh my gosh, you're telling us not to listen to this, that, or the other thing. Stop. Put the fear away and hear the truth. Hear the message. Assimilate it into your being. Okay. I demand a righteousness of you. I demand of you a righteousness that shall exceed the righteousness of those who seek to obtain the Father's favor by almsgiving I'm going to say animal sacrifice, burnt offerings, prayer, fasting, whatever. All of the things that we do to appease others are not in our best interest. All of the things that we do to appease others. Buy that sheep outside the temple, buy that dove outside the temple from that merchant who's paying the clergyman at the temple to be there so that you can do the sacrifice to resolve all of your sins. There is a greed factor at play here. We really need to come to understand what has gone on. He's saying, do these things in secret. Do these things in secret. Because as soon as we start to bow down and cave to the expectations, as soon as we concede to what is deemed acceptable and correct by those in a position of authority or power, we have now given away our own. He was trying to convey to us, none of your faith needs to be public. Because as soon as you start to seek approval from someone outside of you, bad things begin. This is where it begins. Okay? You have a relationship with God. I have a relationship with God. God knows everything I'm doing. God knows my heart. He knows my thoughts. He knows my intents. It doesn't matter how much money I give to a church, institution, priest, etc. It does not matter. It might look good to the people who see it. It makes no difference to God. Anyone who tries to tell us that this is what we need to do to be absolved from our sins, because they know when Christ said, you do these things in secret, no one needs to know this because it is just for you. It is for your relationship with God. And truly, God gets nothing from those things. It would be enough to have your love and devotion. Okay? So it would be enough for you to say, I want to be the best child I can be and do the will of the Father by serving my brothers and sisters to the best of my ability, whatever that is for you. And nobody can tell you what that looks like. Nobody can tell anybody what that looks like. Okay, sorry, a little passionate there. All right, so what does this go on to say here? Okay. Right. I look beyond the act to uncover the motive, and I just said that the Father knows your intent, and that the intent, it's already done. Once your intent is there and you have acted on it, you know, if you realize what's going on in you, you have a chance to intercede and stop a reaction. There's a difference between a response and a reaction. Okay? We can respond in love. We can react in love, but most don't. While in a body, reacting in love is not the default setting. Reacting is usually coming from an egoic place, and so we have to be careful to respond and not to react. You shall not commit adultery, da 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 da. Okay. According to their intents and desires, and I will speak to this for just a moment. So, who is to say what behavior is adulterous? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Okay, and here's what I'm going to say, because this is an Essene teaching. Maybe not a teaching. If a husband and wife, and I know a lot of Christians are going to have a really hard time with this, but okay. And so here's where it comes into with homosexuality. So if a husband and wife want to invite a third party or a fourth party into their marital sexual relationship, if the husband and wife are both wanting that and are both in agreement to that, that is not adultery. If all of the participants in that act are in agreement and not causing harm to another, let's say it's 4 people and 2 married couples. If all 4 people, if both married couples, if all of them are in harmony and in agreement with this situation and what goes on, as long as they are in agreement, this is not adultery. It becomes adultery at the point that it is no longer working for one of them and it causes harm. It is not a situation I would want to have, because I don't like, that's not for me. But it is also not for me to look at a situation like that and to be scornful or to be judgmental or critical. If they are happy living that lifestyle, they are going to be happy in the world, and they are going to spread happy in the world. Sorry. Same way with homosexuality. It doesn't matter if you're a woman who loves a woman or a man who loves a man or whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as you're not doing harm and you are genuinely loving each other and being authentic with each other, that blesses the whole world and everyone in it. Because it is love. It is love in action. It only becomes sinful when it causes harm or someone is not a willing participant. And let's speak to that for just a minute. Thank you for that little. Children. Children, as a parent, I know that children, their minds are not able to make that choice for themselves. And I'm going to take that a step further. Let's say you have a parent who, for whatever reason, is really okay with their 12-year-old son, daughter, doing sexual acts with an adult, No. That child is not able to make that decision for themselves. And as a real parent, what was in the last reading about what real fatherly love is, a real parent would say, my child is not able to make that decision. In good conscience, my child is not able to make a good decision for themselves in that situation. And so I need to be responsible to do that. I don't care how. I don't care if you lower the age of consent to 13. They are not ready. They are not able at 13 to make those decisions in good conscience. And some might say that some adults are never really able to make that decision either, and that's true. But once they become an adult, they're an adult. And who decides what age that is? Who decides? Let's get some wise parents to sit around and have the conversation if it needs discussion. if it even needs discussion. Okay. Let's see. What else was in here? I have not come, when they were asking about the divorcement, Jesus says, I have not come to legislate, but to enlighten. I have come not to reform the kingdom of this world. That tells you right there that these laws were established in the world, of the world. Okay? I have not come to legislate, but to enlighten. I have come not to reform the kingdoms of this world, but rather to establish the kingdom of heaven. So he says, I have come to show you that which you don't know. You already have these laws in place because you feel they're necessary to contain or to control the populace. I'm coming to tell you something that you have no idea or conception of, which is love and a much higher order of operation from a spiritual, loving place. Here's the caveat to that. We need to figure out how to blend the two. We need to figure out how to blend the two, because it wasn't the one and it wasn't the other. But how do you find a medium, a happy place in the middle where people aren't killing each other and your lives are being led in the service of love and compassion and caring and consideration, cooperation? We on this planet, in these earthly bodies, need to find that middle place. And I'll tell you what's happening. Every day, little by little, we're getting closer to the love side of spirit. And more of us want to go that direction. And we want to drop away these old systems that tell us what is politically correct while lying to our faces because it sounds good. It sounds good. It's not true, but it sounds good. Okay, so let me see if there's anything more here. Okay. It is not, so right after the kingdom of heaven, it is not the will of the Father that I should yield to the temptation to teach you. I love Christ. I love him. I love him. I read this in the Bible too. This was a good one because Christ is really saying, oh, there's a lot I'd like to tell you that you're doing wrong. It is not the will of the Father that I should yield to the temptation to teach you rules of government, trade, or social behavior. Which, while they might be good for today, would be far from suitable for the society of another age. And why is this important? This is important because the energies here, the world keeps changing. We're evolving all the time. And what may work, what may be necessary as far as, okay, so if we take, we'll look at it in children. If we take two children and one is harming themselves and, you know, very violent and violent to others, violent to themselves, there are certain precautions we need to take with that child. even to the point of restraining them when necessary so that they don't hurt themselves or others. In love, restraining them for safety. That doesn't mean we restrain every child. That doesn't mean it's necessary in every situation. It doesn't mean that that child needs to be restrained constantly. Okay? And so what he's saying, what Christ is saying here is, I could dictate these things to you. In fact, I'd really like to, but it's not the will of my Father, so I'm not going to do it. But my personality says I'd really like to tell you how to do this stuff. But I can't, because the Father's will, because the wisdom of the Father knows that whatever I lay out for you today may not work tomorrow. And so you can't hold steadfast to this thing. You have to learn the teachings that I'm bringing. You have to know them. You have to assimilate them into your being so that you can make the necessary adjustments as they are needed to whatever laws are in place at the time. When those laws need to shift and change, you shift and change them to work for the time. This is why we can't be so rigid in anything. This is why we can't say this thing is the right thing for everybody. We can't do that. Only in the do no harm. If we ran everything like that, yeah, that's an absolute. Do no harm. Why not? Do no harm. Do not, with malice intent, set out against another person. That would work. That's one absolute we could put in place right now. Up until someone does that. And then what? As soon as someone causes harm intentionally to another, or are being grossly irresponsible, drinking and driving, something like that, right? And then they cause harm to someone else. Oh, now we have this do no harm. What are we going to do to them? So maybe we kick them out of our community and we say, you can no longer be a part of our community because you have been grossly irresponsible and caused terrible harm to this person. You know? So we have to be careful of how we define harm as well. Do no harm. The intention is not to punish, but the intention is to protect those who are left. And so in that, there is no harm. So again, that's why he's saying, I can't give you an absolute law to go by, though I'd really like to, because I have some things I could add in here. I love him. He's so funny. Okay. And again, he says, while Moses looked with favor upon such things, it was not so in the days of Adam and in the garden. And so that's just reaffirming that, you know, Moses said, this is what we're going to do today, but it was not acceptable in another time. You know, so we have to be, if we are hearkening to the message of Christ, if we are truly living that life, if we are truly focused on love and our intention is on love, then we can flex and adjust when those flex and adjustments are needed. So, okay. And he told them, but you will stumble over my teachings because you are wont, W-O-N-T, to interpret my message literally. Yes. Just like the Abraham and Isaac story. You know, Abraham interpreted the message from God, from Heavenly Father, as to offer his son as a burnt offering, instead of saying, you must have faith and turn your children over to God and trust them to God once you have raised them the best you could, to save your own suffering. You know, how many of us have had to do that? can't make choices for my children, though I do, when I feel it's absolutely necessary, speak my opinion on a situation. Because I am human, I have actually said, I forbid you to XYZ, knowing that there was nothing I could do about it. I forbid you to do this. This is how strongly I feel about it, knowing full well that my child was going to make her own choice, but that's how I communicated my feeling on the matter. But I am human at this time. That's a human attribute. That wanting to really stress. This is this is how I feel. This is, yeah. Okay. And then shall we give no place for justice? And an eye for an eye. Yeah, an eye for an eye, right? Oh, let's go back to making the punishment fit the crime. There's a part of me, the human part, that's really cool with that. I'm going to be really gross right now, but I'm going to say if some mother sticks her baby in a microwave, we should have a microwave big enough to shove her in it, right? And there's a part of me that feels like that. But Christ taught to turn the other cheek. Not saying that we let these people continue to harm children all over the place, but to say that in all things to exercise as much compassion as we can, and to use no more force than that which is necessary. We have to be very careful about literal. We live in a world where every message that we communicate today is verbal. Unless you're really good at reading body language, because I read a book one time that said over 80% of communication is nonverbal, which means body language, because most of us aren't telepathic. Some of us are, but most of us aren't. And so when you're dealing with people that really have to rely on words for communication, so much gets misconstrued or lost. We'll be shifting that shortly. Okay. And he's saying that I'm asking more of you. More is expected of you than is expected of everyone else. I'm asking you to rise above the cultural indoctrination. I'm asking you to rise above the ideas of the world, that you can be the forerunners to help merge this truth with what is necessary to maintain some kind of order here. Because this is